Legend says the sword can only be retrieved by a knight when the world is in peril.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Remaking a video game is hard work. How much do you change? How much do you keep the same? If a system is outdated, do you update it to modern standards, or do you leave it alone in homage to the original? Do you update the graphics? If so, how? Higher resolution? New character models and backgrounds? Do you replace sprites with 3D models? If a game doesn't have online multiplayer but would benefit from it, do you add it? What's the line between improving a classic and fundamentally altering its identity? Getting it right means walking a fine line, and as remakes become increasingly common, it's a question that's getting harder and harder to answer. Change too much and you risk alienating your original audience. Change too little and you may not find a new one. Square Enix is no stranger to this conundrum. After the last few years, the company has ported and remastered titles ranging from Final Fantasy to Kingdom Hearts. Secret of Mana's remake, though, is a bit more surprising. While the game is inarguably a stone-cold SNES classic that appeared most recently on the actual SNES Classic console, the series as a whole isn't particularly well known, having sold only 6 million copies through 12 games, many of which received a middling critical reception. Secret of Mana is the exception here, making it even more important that Square Enix gets this right. And while their dedication to preserving the nature of the original game is admirable, there are also some missed opportunities. Secret of Mana is the story of a boy named Randy, who is separated from his friends in the woods. To get home, he'll need a weapon, so he pulls a rusted old sword out from a nearby rock. Turns out that it's not just any rusted old sword, it's the Mana Sword, and pulling it out of its stone upsets the magical balance of the land. Monsters, an evil empire, and even an apocalyptic dragon threaten to destroy the world unless Randy can find the mystical mana seeds, restore the power of his sword, and do the whole save the world thing that was pretty ubiquitous in 90s JRPGs. It's a simple premise, granted, but it's easy to get involved in because of how damn charming the cast and game world are. This is the kind of world where many of the enemies are absurdly cute and you actively feel bad for killing them. This sense of charm is aided by a revised script that irons out the flaws of the original translation and adds new scenes between Randy and your other two party members, a princess named Primmed and a sprite named Popui, whenever you stop at an inn. These conversations help flesh out these characters and add to the story's charm. The biggest change, of course, are the new visuals, which update the original sprites into 2.5D models. While it's always saddening to lose good sprite work, the new visuals are pretty lovely. Think the best work from one of Square's better Final Fantasy ports, only better. The world is bright and colorful and peppered with details, and the character models are great. The game even includes the original bitmap as a minimap in a nice nod to the original release. But there are some inconsistencies as well. The remake adds voice acting and it's actually pretty good, but the characters' mouths don't move when they talk. This is particularly jarring, especially when it becomes obvious that the only time you see their mouths are in cutscenes. In a game with this many cutscenes and this much voice acting, it's a jarring omission that feels cheap at best and lazy at worst. The way the characters enter the cannons that allow you to fast travel is equally lazy. Like in the original game, they simply move behind the cannon. While a visual trick like that works with sprites, it's actively strange to watch with 2.5D models. The other big change is the music, and while the entire soundtrack has been remixed, it's mostly to positive effect. In many cases, the advanced instrumentation works just as well or better than the original soundtrack, but there's some questionable decisions here as well, usually involving an overuse of accordions. Yes, you heard that right, accordions. The most egregious example is in the song Into the Thick of It, where the accordions were somehow chosen to replace flutes. Thankfully, you can switch between the original and remastered soundtracks from the menu if the feeling that you're stuck on a merry-go-round begins to overwhelm you. Beyond that, Secret of Mana is largely the same game as it was in 1993. The combat is simple and takes place in real time. You can swap between any of the 3 characters at will, and each one can wield any of the game's 8 weapons. Each swing of a weapon depletes your character's stamina, which recharges after each attack. Attacking with less than 100% energy reduces your damage and your chance to hit, so it's often better to run around and allow your characters to recharge between attacks. There's also magic which can hit you or your enemies so long as you or they are in range, but magic points are a limited resource, and items that recharge it are costly, so you'll likely save it until the moments where you really need it. The system is engaging despite its simplicity, and becomes more fun if you play the game in co-op, which supports up to 3 people locally. There is unfortunately and bizarrely no online co-op. This has 2 benefits. First, it makes the ring menus, which use the color of your cursor and nothing else, to show whose menu you're in at any given time. This becomes easier to navigate. Second, it solves the issue inherent in the game's AI, which isn't particularly smart. The original grid system that allowed you to determine how passive or aggressive you like them to be is gone, replaced with a series of options dictating basic behavior. And it has trouble pathing, especially if you decide to run from a fight. Finding your healer stuck fighting a monster half the map away while you're trying to accomplish something is exceptionally annoying. If there's one major issue that the remake has that the original has, is that it doesn't give you enough information. Like most games on the SNES, the original release of Secret of Mana shipped with a detailed manual that explained what items in the store did and a map that showed where cities were in relation to certain landmarks. Unfortunately, none of that information has been put into the actual game. This even extends to the armor in the store, since there's no way to see if what's available is better or worse than what you have until after you've bought it. Many times your best bet is to look at something's cost, try to remember what you're wearing, and hope that this new item is better. And that's not all for the flaws from the original game. There is an absurd amount of backtracking in Secret of Mana, especially in the game's first few hours. You'll often have to trek across the map to talk to someone you've already met, only to be told to return to yet another place that you've already been. None of these problems, however, can keep Secret of Mana down. There's simply way too much charm here to contain. The characters are too likable, the combat too enjoyable, the world too beautiful, and the music too good. It's true that Square Enix could and probably should have done more here to bring Secret of Mana into the modern world, but what's here is still quite good, as long as you're willing to put up with a few annoyances here and there. And if nothing else, Randy, Prim, and Popui are at least worth that. That'll be it for this video. If you like what we're doing, please go ahead and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.